Hello everybody, my name's Novi and welcome back to the channel. We are now under a week away from the first ever video I made on this channel, which was a G1 Climax 33 Nights 1 and 2 review. I was new and I knew how to do almost nothing. I mean, even the thumbnail is cooked and I just didn't fix it. But now, a whole year later, we have thumbnails that look a whole lot better and a whole lot more of you watching, which I want to say thank you for. To celebrate the occasion, I thought what better than to preview the fast approaching G1 Climax 34. This year looks a whole lot better than the last, both because of the unpredictability of it all, and of course, the return of a normal format, where I don't have to watch 119 matches. With that in mind, I have high hopes for what it could turn out to be. So today, I'm going to go through some names that I'm particularly interested in this year for both good and bad reasons, and then after that, of course, I'll be predicting who comes out of the blocks and who ultimately wins the G1 Climax 34. Before we get into it all though, leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel for streams every Wednesday before Dynamite and new videos just like these every single Saturday, always doing one thing: talking graps. To kick things off, let's start with a personal favorite of mine, and a guy who a lot of people are looking towards to have consistently the best matches of the entire G1, Konosuke Takeshita. What is there to be said about Takeshita that hasn't already been said? He's a freak athlete, has the perfect physique for a main eventer, has buckets and buckets of charisma, and on top of all of that, he's not even 30 yet. He has one of the brightest futures of any young talent going today, and I think this G1 is only going to shine a brighter light on that. Some of the matchups I'm particularly interested in when it comes to him is ELP, Hiroki Goto, Jeff Cobb, and Henare. And then of course, the semi-main of the opening night against Yota Tsuji, which I think could be the best match of the entire tournament. That's 5 matches right there that I think could be genuinely great. And I have no doubt that he can bring something out of guys like Finlay or even Boltin Oleg. He is the kind of wrestler who elevates whoever he's in the ring with. Takeshita to me is the guy to watch this G1, not to win the whole thing or anything, but to just be great. Next, let's talk Henare, who had a pretty great G1 last year, kind of out of nowhere. He showed up with that new face tattoo and it's almost like it brought out the Hooper in him. His opening match was against Mikey Nichols, and the two had one of the most surprisingly great matches of the whole G1. They were throwing shoot headbutts like CTE wasn't nothing, and the finish was built around one of them getting dropped on their head just one too many times. That match being so great and so brutal is credit to both Henare and Mikey, of course. But since then, Henare in particular never stopped that level of intensity. Just look at the United Empire versus the War Dogs cage match from earlier this year, where he cracked his head open early on and then came back later to do more headshots. It's simple really. Henare is a certified sick fuck, and his matches have been a whole lot better for it, even if they do scare the shit out of me sometimes. This new level that he's hitting on a pretty consistent basis has me thinking that this G1 could be transformative for him. If he's able to go out there and consistently be great amongst a field that is a lot more open and full of less star power than in years prior, he can put himself in position to be a guy they look at for a big singles push coming out of the tournament. It's all up to him though to make it happen, so I'll be particularly locked in to see what Henare makes of the G1 this year. This year's G1 is interesting because it featured qualifying tournaments to earn G1 spots in both the A and B blocks. One name of 6 on each side was making it in, and the field was loaded. You have Hiroshi Tanahashi, who is of course the ace and also hasn't missed the G1 since 2001, Tomohiro Ishii, who is the pinnacle of consistency in New Japan, who hasn't missed it in 11 years, Toru Yano, who has been in 17 consecutive G1s, but even amongst those usual locks and names like Taichi, Kenta, and Yoshihashi, New Japan decided to go with the youth. Callum, Newman, and Boltin Oleg are in the G1 through these qualifiers, and they're both guys I'm excited to see this year. Sure, it's pretty likely and more of a guarantee that they won't win a single match all G1, considering they're both very young into their New Japan tenures, but I'm not paying attention to them because they can be some big winners. I'm paying attention to see how two young wrestlers look in such a big spot. New Japan is taking a risk on these guys. They're both young, like I said, and that comes with not being as polished as you'd usually expect for G1 entrants. But you don't have just anyone beat Hiroshi Tanahashi in under 7 minutes like Boltin did. The office clearly thinks that both of these guys can make something of themselves in this G1, and if they can live up to that, they can get a whole lot more people excited about them as prospects, and even set themselves up as guys we should look at as the future of New Japan, alongside all the usual suspects in that conversation. I personally love love when young wrestlers step up when they're given these big opportunities. You all know that if you watch my G1 videos last year. So I'm really looking forward to see how these two fare, and if I'm being honest, I'm rooting for them to kill it. Now it's time to get to someone I'm worried about this G1, someone I was worried about even before the G1, the current IWGP World Champion, Tetsuya Naito. Look, a lot of people have been playing nice and dancing around the truth for a while now, but it's come time for even the biggest Naito fans to admit he's considerably not who he once was, and in my opinion is an actively bad wrestler outside of maybe 2 or 3 matches a year. That scares me as we look ahead to at minimum 9 singles matches in 4 weeks. I might be a little harsh saying he's an actively bad wrestler, but I think everyone can admit that that's a bit scary. That's a lot of wrestling in a very short time for a guy who's already looking real beat up. There are a few people in his block I think can bring something out of him at this stage. Zack Sabre Jr., Shingo Takagi, and maybe even Gabe Kidd if he's just a little asshole. But I'm not certain that even they can do it, and that has me worried for Naito in this G1. Another guy I'm worried about this G1 is David Finlay. I'm not necessarily worried because his matches will suck. I think they're usually pretty average as long as it's not some shitter on the other side of the ring. And if it's a good wrestler, they can honestly be pretty above average. But what I'm really worried about though is how far New Japan might push him in this G1. They chose him as the Bullet Club leader all that time ago for a reason, and they've stuck with it for a reason. They clearly see some kind of main event upside in him, and we saw it last year in the G1 where he made it to the quarterfinals. They'll put him in those big spots no matter how the general fan base feels about him. I personally don't think he belongs there. I don't think he possesses the skills to be that guy, but I simply can't see his push stopping now, especially in the weaker of the 2 blocks. I don't know how far he'll actually go. I'm gonna get to my predictions here in a bit, but that's what I'm worried about. I don't think we need a David Finlay G1 run as much as we didn't need it last year. Next, I think we have to talk about the Reiwa group of talent and how they might fare this year. It's best we start with the parts of the group that I'm more optimistic about in Yota Tsuji, Shota Umino, and Gabe Kidd. Last year, these 3, alongside Kaito Kiyomiya, were what made that A block the best of the whole G1. Consistently great matches from all of them that featured performances that really made me feel like they were going out there to prove a point every single night. Coming out of that tournament, where somehow none of those 3 advanced out of the block, with Gedo instead going with Hikuleo, I think they've managed to prove that in one way or another, they're the future. That's not me saying they have it all put together right now. I don't think that they do, but they're good enough to go far in this G1, and they've shown that they can step up if they're given that chance. However, there's 2 other names in the group that I'm very worried about this year, and that's of course Ren Narita and Yuya Uemura. Yuya wasn't in last year's G1. They thought he'd be better served in TNA alongside Joe Hendry for some reason. So he has a lot to prove, and I'm not so sure based on his recent performances that he can do it. He has the fundamentals down, no doubt, we know that, but can he elevate in a higher setting? I'm not convinced. Ren, on the other hand, was in last year's G1. It's just that he was a pretty obvious weak spot in a great A block. There's just something about him that's missing, and he kinda found it with House of Torture, but he's still not on the level of his counterparts Yota Tsuji and Shota Umino, not by a long shot. I'm worried he won't be able to hold his own in this G1, especially when he's being compared to those 2. And if he doesn't, he could potentially fall even further behind them. I think it's the case for both guys. They have to make this G1 their own. They have to stand out in at least a few big moments, because truthfully, there's no better time to do so than right now. Lots to see when it comes to all 5 members of this group, and I'm very interested to see it all because they're consistently one of my favorite parts of the G1. The last individual name I'll talk about before getting to predictions is Zack Sabre Jr. Zack is going into this G1 with a ton of momentum on his side, fighting alongside Will Ospreay and Bryan Danielson for Wrestler of the Year for many, including myself, of course. He's been simply incredible this year, much like all of his previous years. Every time he goes out there, he proves that technical wrestling isn't boring grabs. It's just that a lot of people, probably nobody, does it as well as he does. Takeshita is the guy in B block I think can have great matches with any of the others, and Zack Sabre Jr. is that same guy for the A block. Hell, he might be able to get a good match out of Evil or Jake Lee, and I think that shows how highly I regard him. Since we're about to get into predictions too, I think I might as well say now, I think he's one of the favorites to win the entire tournament. If there's any time to give him the chance to get to the top of New Japan and prove he can hang at that level, it's right now, and I don't think they'd be wrong to make that choice at all. Zack Sabre Jr. is one of the best wrestlers in the world, and he could very easily win G134, and I don't think they'd be wrong to make that call. But will they actually make that call? Let's get into predictions. When it comes to A block, there's a lot of names I could see advancing. This is the more stacked of the two blocks after all. I think the guys with chances is Sonata, who was the champion last year. Gabe could always do it as a shock given his rise in status this year. Evil is always lurking in the G1 and they did it last year. But who I'm actually picking is Shingo Takagi, Shota Umino, and Zack Sabre Jr. With Zack winning the block overall, Shota going in the 2 spot, and Shingo going in the 3. Shota, despite not having any main events this year for some reason, perfectly fits the youth movement aspect of this G1. Shingo is always a guy who gets snubbed for the top of New Japan, and I'll never understand it. He's really fucking good. And maybe this is the year, with less star power in the G1 overall, that they finally give him the chance to be that top name with fans in the crowd. And I talked about Zack just now. He seems simply undeniable this year. Now we can head on over to the B block, which feels a whole lot less open to me than the A. They could send Henare through. He's been having that career renaissance like I talked about earlier. Maybe Takeshita if him being an AEW and DDT guy doesn't bother them too much, which it probably will, but he's good enough for it. They had Yuya or Uemura win at Wrestle Kingdom this year in what was a shock. Maybe they decide to shock the world again. My picks are a whole lot more straightforward though. I have Jeff Cobb, David Finlay, and Yota Tsuji advancing to the knockouts. Jeff Cobb in the 3, David Finlay in the 2, and Yota Tsuji winning the block overall. Jeff Cobb always seems to get close to advancing but never does, and in a less stacked field, I think it's his year. Finlay, like I talked about earlier, is New Japan's guy, and he'll be going through with all of us kicking and screaming, and Yota, much like Shota, is what the youth movement is all about this year. But that leaves our potential knockout bracket being Shota Umino versus Shingo Takagi, and Jeff Cobb versus David Finlay in the quarterfinals. There, I have Shingo and Finlay advancing, making for a Shingo versus Zack Sabre Jr. and Finlay versus Yota Tsuji semifinals. There, I have Shingo and Tsuji advancing, making for an all LIJ finals with Shingo Takagi versus Yota Tsuji being my pick. If this is the scenario, there's a lot of reasons to go with both guys. You can finally give Shingo that main event run in front of fans, you could cement Tsuji as the young guy, and of those two options, I'm gonna go with Yota Tsuji winning the G1 Climax 34, setting up a match versus his faction leader Tetsuya Naito at Wrestle Kingdom in the Tokyo Dome. As much as I'd love to see Zack or Shingo get it done, I think if they're making this year about the youth, they have to solidify that with the winner. With that being said though, that's going to do it for today's video everybody. I hope you all enjoyed this preview of G1 Climax 34, and I hope my predictions don't end up making me look really dumb, but I'm sure they will. This tournament looks really good this year, and just like the last, I'm really excited for it. There will be a review on this channel when it's all said and done, so be on the watch for that. I'd also love to see your predictions down in the comments below. Your winner, some people you're looking at this tournament, anything. And also make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel while you're down there. Thank you guys so much for watching in this last year. It's been fantastic. I've loved every second of it, and it's all because of you guys. We've now had the same outro for a whole year. It's been Novi. Much love to you all. Peace.